So I want to thank everybody for coming. We're going to be talking about something that's very dear to me, and that's you. That's yourself. And I want to say thank you to Heinrich for having us. Heinrich is quite the human, as we all know. So, Idaho Hank. I'm going to be giving a talk, and then we will go into a meditation, and then we can have Q&A after that. But first, I'd like to read you a letter. And this is a unique letter. This is a letter written by yourself, from yourself, through yourself, to yourself. And you've entitled it Remembering. And you've defined the word to remember. It means to bring an awareness of something that one has always known, yet has only appeared to have forgotten. Hello, my dear. I write you this letter to remind yourself of who you are. Simply put, you are unconditional love. You are not the definition of love. You are not the idea of love. You are not some silly, fabricated, Hollywood, unattainable love. You are love itself. Love is the fabric of your very essence. You know this more intimately than the deepest relationships and thoughts, yet most likely you have forgotten. You know this knowing of who you are can't get any closer to you. In fact, your love is so close that even the concept of knowing your love moves you away from it. That is how interwoven your love is. Love is yourself loving itself. Yourself is love loving itself. You are it. You are love. It is your very being. Perceive life from this loving fabric, and you will know happiness. You, unconditional love, have beautiful qualities. You are boundless, whole, peaceful, and complete. You have no lack. There is no before love, during love, or after love. Love is eternal and infinite, and therefore so are you. You, love itself, is like the sun that never stops shining. Only when clouds roll in and temporarily block the sun's rays, does it only seem the sun disappears. But in reality, the sun's rays never stop. They're only veiled. This is like the love that lives as you. Your love's rays are constantly present. They only sometimes seem to be veiled by negative, unwanted thoughts and emotions. But once remembered, you can access your love again and again and again. Your love's rays are forever available to rest into, like a mother coddling her newborn child, ever present and unconditionally accepting. My dear, please do not get who you are confused with what you are. Who you are is unconditional love. What you are is all of your authentic actions and expressions that arise out of your love. Be it you're a craftsman, a manager, a mother or father, a designer, a husband or wife, a teacher, or an artist. These are but a few examples of how your love can express itself. What you are is like a free-spirited wave that arises out of an ocean of love. A wave is free to express itself, but never separate from its source. Therefore, your purpose in life is to be love and share your love with the world. There is no effort to serve your purpose, only the willingness and courage to know yourself as yourself. In closing, this letter is a prompt. It's a tap on the shoulder to remember to never forget, to never forget your origin of being, and to share what you find there. You, my dear, are granting yourself your own permission to be you and to transform the world with the love of yourself. Sincerely, you. This evening is all about remembering. It's about remembering who you are. It's about remembering your true nature. The true nature of yourself is peace, happiness, and love. And when you're totally honest with yourself, you know this to be true. Unfortunately, we've spent most of our lives looking somewhere else other than ourselves for the peace and love that we seek and that we desire. Tonight is about discussing how our love, how our self gets veiled, and how we can unveil it so that we can express ourselves clearly and pure. What we're going to talk about tonight is unbelievable. It's unimaginable. It's impossible. It's unknowable. And it's unnameable. Yet I'm going to attempt to describe something that's been tried to be described for millennium. And since you can't know it, you can't know this with your mind. You can't know yourself with your mind. So I'm asking you to stay as open as possible. Try to take what's being said here tonight and move it from a conceptual image into an experience of your being. Again, it can't be known conceptually or intellectually. So the more open you are to hearing what's being pointed to, the more possibility you will experience it directly. What's being proposed is a different reality. It's a different model of reality. Our current model of reality goes something like this in a nutshell, of course. 13.8 billion years ago, a massive event happened known as the Big Bang. Over the course of billions of years, this mass consolidated and cooled and formed the cosmos that we know today. A couple billion years ago, life crawled out of the ooze because Earth became ideal enough for life to climb out of the ooze. A couple million years ago, apes stood up from 4 feet to 2 feet and developed a brain. And when that brain developed, consciousness arose out of that brain. Now you had upright individuals with consciousness that design the civilizations that we have today. That is what most of this Earth, planet Earth, considers as what we'd say the model of reality. Yet, where it gets really perplexing and bewildering, is that there is not one proof of evidence for this model. There is not one shred of evidence that this, we'll call this a matter-first model of reality exists. For instance, for over 100 years, quantum physicists have known that matter does not exist. this stuff that you're sitting on, this stuff that you're wearing, everything that you know has never been found. Every time they go to look for it, they always end up in an unknowable place. Every time what they're saying is that this is here, but it's not what it appears to be. That everything that is known, all the matter in the world and the universe and cosmos, doesn't have a standalone reality. It says that it borrows its existence from an underlying reality. So let me give you an example. A wooden chair. A wooden chair borrows its existence from wood. Wood borrows its existence from carbohydrates. Carbohydrates borrows its existence from carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen borrow its existence from protons, neutrons, and electrons, which borrows its existence from quarks, which borrows its existence from bosons, which borrows its existence from dark matter, which borrows its existence from dark energy. And dark energy is just a fabric of potential. It's unmeasurable. It's unknowable. This fabric is an all-connected, it's one connected source. It's all made up of the same thing, and it all talks to each other. When you touch the cosmos on this side, the other side of the cosmos, and every other piece in that dark energy knows that you touched it here. So everything that we know is matter doesn't have its own standalone existence. Again, another way of saying that is they've never found things. Another example. Neuroscientists have never found an ego. They've never found an individual. They've never found you. The thing that you believe yourself to be, an independent person that has done this life, they've never found that. Even today, they don't know where this ego is. They don't know where it lies in us, if it's in the left-hand side of the brain or the right-hand side of the brain. The closest they can get is that we are a bundle of thoughts, images, and ideas that we've identified with. And thoughts, images, and ideas have no substance of themselves. So we've taken ourselves to be what we could call an illusion. And lastly, neuroscientists have never, they don't have one plausible idea on how consciousness arises out of brain matter. It's known as the hard problem of consciousness. They have no idea how brain matter or brain activity generates consciousness. None. Any attempt to try to describe how it happens, they always have to throw in a miracle or two. So, said differently, matter hasn't been located. Therefore, your body has not been located. Your ego hasn't been located. Therefore, your mind has not been located. And they have no idea how we're experiencing how we experience the world as it is. You could say this matter first model. It's a matter first model because matter, the Big Bang happened, matter happened, and then billions of years down the road, consciousness happened. Consciousness is we don't even talk about consciousness in this hemisphere. Rarely. It is a model of separation because it says that I have my own reality here, right? I have my own personal consciousness here. It ends at my skin. Then there's space, and each of you have your own individual realities of consciousness separate from mine, separate from everything else, separate from everything. So this matter first model that we're all familiar with is a model of separation. And what's being suggested here is that all the conflict that we know internally, we all know internal conflict. Sometimes it could be described as depression or anxiety or anything like that. And all of the conflict on the outside in the world, wars, hate, violence, is all based on the wrong model of reality. It's based on a model that has never been found and is based on a model of separation. Now we get to the main topic of the evening, which is non-duality. This whole message tonight is known as non-duality. Non-duality is the English word for the Eastern body of wisdom that came out of India, known as Advaita Vedanta. Advaita literally means not two, or said slightly different, one without a second. It states, so Advaita and non-duality I'll use interchangeably. They mean the same thing, because Advaita is not two, and non-duality means there's not two. Right? Dualism would mean hot and cold, good and bad. This is non-duality. That means there's not two of anything. Okay? Advaita Vedanta, and then so Vedanta means in English terms to be philosophy. But in Indian terms, it would mean a way of being. A way of being is not a state of mind. We all know states of mind. States of mind come and go. Happiness comes and goes. Sadness comes and goes. Everything comes and goes because your mind is constantly fluctuating. A way of being is permanence. Nothing changes. And that's what we're pointing to here tonight, is a way of being that's permanent. Advaita states that there's only one reality, that there's only one substance that makes up all of these apparent objects that we know in the world and cosmos. It states that the self, your self, is this one reality. And your self is the single resonance of peace, happiness, and love. So, going back to the matter model first, that says there's no evidence, this model of reality, non-duality, that states that there's only one substance here, has to have at least one piece of evidence. And that one piece of evidence is you, is yourself. Ask yourself the question, do I exist? Notice that you asked the question, there was a pause, you went somewhere that delivered the answer of yes. Yes, I exist. Notice that you did not have to second guess the answer, nor did you have to consult your mind for approval that you exist. You went to a place that delivered the answer yes, and then you brought it out. Yes, of course I do. And if you were trying to be smart about it and said I don't exist, you would say, well, what has to be aware that knows that you don't exist? Your existence is inescapable. In fact, your existing, know that you exist, knowing that you exist, is the only thing that you absolutely know for sure. Everything else is in question. Well, Advaita, being that there's only one substance here that's creating the many, it has to have one property at least. It has to exist. A one model reality has to exist. And because you know you actually exist, because you went inside and found this place that yes, I exist, and Advaita's saying there's only one existence, well, your existence has to be the one existence. And that is the one piece of evidence here that this model of reality known as non-duality exists, or has a piece of evidence, and that your existence is that evidence. Advaita wraps your existence, the knowing of your existence, up in three terms. They call it Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat is existence or being. Chit is awareness, consciousness, or knowing. And Ananda is bliss. These are not three things. These are three things of the one essence of yourself. The one essence of existence as yourself. You exist. You know you exist. And when you know you exist as yourself, peace, happiness, and love arise out of that. So the goal in life is to know yourself directly and to experience what Advaita is saying here. Your self is unborn. Your self has ever existed. It has ever lived, and therefore it will never die. Being unborn, it means you're eternal. And being ever present also means that you're eternal. Ever present, if I was to have said if you were forever present, forever means there is an infinitely long timeline in which you are on that timeline. You are a moment in time moving down that timeline. Ever means the absence of a timeline. There is no time. There's no beginning of self. There's no middle of self, and there's therefore no end of self. Your self has no boundaries. It has no borders. It is infinite. It can't distance itself from itself. Every time it tries to distance itself from itself, it only finds more of itself. Every time you try to distance yourself from yourself, you only find more of yourself. So therefore, there's no outside of self. There's no outside of you. You can't step outside of yourself to look back at yourself and say, hey, I'm over there because I've stepped outside of myself. Every time self tries to step out of itself, it only finds more of itself because there's only one substance that never started, there's no middle, and there's no edges. Therefore, there's no middle of self. There's no inner of self. There's no inside of self. Anytime self tries to pull itself apart to see what there is, when it pulls itself apart, all it finds is more of itself. Self, yourself, isn't even one. It's oneness. One would mean that I have one fist relative to one palm. It would mean that there is self, and then there's contrast that says I'm one self relative to something else. This is duality. And what we're talking about here is non-duality. That's why they call it Advaita. It's not even one. It's one without a second. In reality, self doesn't even exist. It is existence in itself. The word existence comes from the Latin term existere, where ex means out of and astere means to take a stand from. For self to exist, that would mean it would have to come out of non-existence to exist apart from non-existence. It would have to come out of non-existence to take a stand to say, I exist apart from non-existence. So now you have non-existence and you have existence, and now you have duality. Everything I'm trying to say here to describe to you is that self cannot separate itself from itself. It has no clue. You have no clue what separation is. Referring back to the matter first model, where it's all based on separation, non-duality is the absence of separation. Non-duality is total unity. It is the absence of suffering. Because suffering, human suffering, arises when we believe we're separate. When I believe that I'm here and you're over there, that means that I'm separate. And I have to fend for myself somehow and survive life. In the non-dual model of reality, there is no separation. This is the one substance appearing as many. So, moving from a matter model first to a consciousness model first, you experience unity. You are not over there, and I am not over here. There's no distance between us. And therefore there's no suffering. There's no internal suffering, and there's no external conflict. So what are what's the mechanism of this? How does this work? How can one be many? How can a one appear as many in a non-dual Advaita model of reality? Consciousness, or yourself, is infinite and formless, like what was just described. What it does is it contracts itself. It collapses itself, its infinite self, into a finite form of itself, which appears as the manifestation of the world and of the universe that we know. The underlying reality of everything we know is the play of consciousness. So again, it's the infinite formless that has collapsed itself into a finite form of itself that's appearing as the many. Even the space is itself. Everything is itself, because there's only one substance. This is likened to many forms that gold takes. Right? Gold can be a ring, an earring, a chain, a bar, a coin. But even though all of those forms have the same underlying reality of gold. So it's the one reality of gold, the one substance of gold appearing as the many forms. This is the one substance of gold appearing as the many forms. This is the one substance of yourself, of consciousness, appearing as these forms, just like gold in all of its forms. So what is it that makes us think that we're all separate? Why does it appear that you're over there and I'm over here? This is because of the ego. The ego's definition is separation. So we're born pure being. We're born as our true nature of peace, happiness, and love. And somewhere around 4 or 5, we start to listen to our parents and maybe our brothers and sisters that say, you aren't who you are. You're a boy or a girl. You're cute, and so on. And we start to believe what they're saying. And we start to identify with what others say that we are. And as we get older, we start to build this thing called an ego. We start to say, oh, I'm 5 feet tall. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm good at math. I'm a slow runner. So on. You start to build this thing. And over time, you build a false image of yourself, and you believe that you're that false image. And the moment you start to believe you're that false image of ego, you start to lose touch with the love of yourself. And that's when suffering starts. And then we're told to run around the world in our life to look for love and happiness and peace everywhere but right here. We're supposed to go out and become somebody and figure out our talents and maybe have a relationship or not, maybe get married or not, have a career or not. These are all identifications other than ourselves. We think we can find it in wealth or objects. You know the routine. It's futile. That's why billionaires, they just need more. Every time you get to somewhere, you need more. It's never enough. The ego is insatiable. It's futile to try to find peace, happiness, and love out in the world. So what happens We're born this beautiful beam of light. And over time, we build this ego that cloaks this light. It dims our light. And when we cloak our light, it creates a sense of separation where everything becomes separate from us. But in reality, there's no separation here. You can say that we identify with our adjuncts. An adjunct is something we add to ourselves. So when we say something like, I am a male, I am an engineer, I am a skier, I am 6 feet tall, we step over who we are, our I am. Our I am is a direct conduit back to ourself. We step over ourself and identify with things other than ourselves. So what we're pointing to here tonight is, it doesn't mean that life stops. It doesn't mean that what you're doing in your life ends. It just means you don't identify with it anymore. You come back home to yourself. So how do you come back home to yourself? Well, this is a technique that comes out of Advaita. It's called self-inquiry. The moment that you look for the ego, it vanishes. Anytime you search for yourself, you will see that you always end up back home itself. Because your ego is a phantom. It's a ghost. It's an illusion. That's why Western academia still hasn't found it. It doesn't exist. And every time you go and look for it, every time you search for it, you always end up in the same place of yourself. So this technique called self-inquiry or self-investigation is turning our attention back into ourself, away from the worldly objects, away from the ego, and turning our attention back into ourself and abiding in and as ourself relentlessly. And the more that we tend to ourself, the more we experience its beautiful qualities permanently. As Western mindsets, as an ego, we have this thing called consciousness back here. We ignore it all day long. And our ego is out here. And the more you turn within and rest and abide in yourself, this beautiful being, this presence, comes to the forefront as the ego collapses. As ego collapses, because it doesn't exist to begin with, this presence of being comes to the forefront. This permanent way of being yourself. So the ultimate goal is to figure out, is to see what I'm pointing to is true. Don't take my word for it. The only proof, the only evidence is direct experience. The direct experience of yourself. Turning back within and resting in and as your being. That dissolves the ego. That dissolves separation. That creates total unity, where you're not over there and I'm not over here. And when you're not over there and I'm not over here, that means you know yourself as others and others as yourself. and you lose the ability to hate and harm. Because you're only hating and harming yourself. You lose the ability to exploit or take because you're only taking from yourself. And that's why it's so important to learn how to come home to yourself. The more and more you know yourself directly as this presence of being, this presence of happiness rises to the front stage and it's permanently there, you unavoidably shine. You unavoidably and inadvertently shine. Because there's no ego left to veil you. So you beam. And this is the greatest gift that you can give the world and humanity, is yourself. And it takes no effort. It seems like it's going to take effort because you've built this ego up over decades. And the ego is saying to you, what this guy's saying is nuts. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to go down this road of non-duality? What would be left if I, the ego, were to disappear? What would remain? The same thing that's remaining right here. Reality is here and now. How would this work? How would I go to work? How would I make money? Who would do all of this if I'm not here, the ego would say. The same energy, the same being that's doing it right now. Yourself. The ego is a phantom. It doesn't do anything. A ghost can't do anything. So I encourage you to do everything you can to understand what's being said here tonight and to investigate into it, to see and experience directly what's being pointed to here. Because like what I said, it's unbelievable. It's unimaginable. It's unknowable. And yet, you are experiencing it as yourself at this very moment. That's the end of the talk. I'd like to move into a meditation now.